And I think I just realized my camera's probably covering a lot of stuff. That really, really sucks. Wow. I just realized that. Damn. Right. I made a note to change that, and now I'll have it be better for every lesson moving forward. If you have any questions related to that blender, please let me know. I will do a really good job in the comment section, especially of this video, of answering any questions that you could not have answered because I forgot to move my camera. Absolutely hilarious, I'm not gonna lie to you. Yo, what up, homie? Welcome to level 2. In this video, we're going to be going over an in-depth overview of the FL Studio interface. By the end of this video, you're going to understand what the terms browser, channel rack, playlist, mixer, and piano roll mean. You'll be able to understand the various functionalities associated with those terms and those tools inside of FL Studio, and you'll also be able to understand how to edit the theme of your workspace so that you can get it to look like a different color. Yours might not look like the way mine looks right now. It's purple. You'll probably have a stock interface layout. We'll also go over how to change that. And at the very end, we'll go over an example of how to use the skills we learned in this video to make our very first beat. So without too much more talking, let's get into talking about the first tool, which is the browser. So very simply put, the browser is where you're going to be able to access files, and specifically your drum kits. So the first thing I actually want to show you is how you can bring a drum kit into the browser. Now, FL Studio has a bunch of stock stuff for you here, which you can access from the browser. Again, this is the browser. It's pretty straightforward in terms of actually engaging with the interface. And this is how your drum kits will populate exactly the way it has for these stock FL Studio sounds. But if you want to use your own things, what you'll do is you'll come up to options, and you can really click any of these things, and it'll bring you any of these system settings, and it'll bring you into the overall systems interface. But we want to go specifically to file settings. And like I said, you can then just toggle the tabs from there. We'll open up file. And as you'll see, I have some folders already open that I like to access from my CPU's main directory, basically. And so that's how you access your drum kits. It's in a folder somewhere on your computer, and you're telling FL Studio to call to that folder so that it can access the contents in that folder if they are like audio, or right, because MIDI is a format of audio. So if we want to add a new folder, which is what we want to do, we'll go in here. And I just created a demo desktop so that I could demonstrate this to you. So as you can see, the 14 drum kit is already here. And hang on, let me just go back really quickly. So right, the 14 drum kit is already in here, and it's 100% free. You can download it in a link in the description below, or you can find it on my website, dopecontentonly.net. But something that is more effective is to create a packs folder and then organize that packs folder as you go, and that kind of becomes your sample library. And then you can do like semi-intelligent things like back it up every once in a while on the cloud or on an external hard drive. Like I have all of my actual packs on an external hard drive. But like I said, for this example, I just want to show you how the actual workflow works so that you can do it for yourself. So what I'll do in here is I'll just create a demo packs folder, and we'll use this for the entirety of the course. And so now that I'm in my demo desktop, what I'm going to do is I'm going to just drag the 14 drum kit or your drum kit of choice into that packs folder that you've created, right? So we've dragged it into that packs folder. So the next thing we're going to do is go back to FL Studio. And as we can see, that change has happened in this file explorer as well. So we'll open that up, or actually we'll open that up just to check, right? So yeah, right. We see 14 in there. And so what we're going to do is we're going to select that folder, and we're going to click open. And as we can see, it just populated a demo packs directory for us to access directly in FL Studio. So we're all good to go here, but we will be back here when we go to theme settings in a moment. And now we can go to our demo packs, and there we see the 14 drum kit. And here we can hear all of the sounds that are in the 14 drum kit. And this is the other really kind of good utility that I end up getting out of the browser. There's a lot of different things you can do in the browser, many more things than even I know how to do, but the most practical things and the most useful things to me are the things that I want to demonstrate in this course. So something really, really cool is just being able to audition your files. If you had something that was like a longer loop and you wanted to play the whole thing, like, right, I think it's going to stop. This is too long, right? Right. So if you want to play the entire file, all you have to do is click it right here. I believe you used to have to hold the Option key or the Alt key on Windows, but as long as you just click the file right there in your browser, you'll be able to listen to the whole thing if you've got like a longer melody loop or a longer drum loop or something like that. A couple of other useful things in the browser are the current project folder that you can drop down here. And something really helpful here is just being able to access your project data. Various audio files will populate here in case you can't access them in your pattern picker for some reason. Same thing with like patterns, for example, your MIDI patterns, your channel rack patterns will populate here. So that tends to be pretty helpful. You can also use the recent files drop down folder, which I find to be very, very helpful. And this will just show you like I don't know however many this is right now, and I'm not about to count it, but it'll show you like just the most recent things you've accessed, VSTs, presets, sample files, in case you want to just like go back and grab something really quickly, or if like you just opened up a new project and you want to know like what sounds were inspirational in the last project you were working on. I tend to find that that is very helpful as well. And again, you can just audition those as well. You can drag them, which we'll get into how to drag stuff and how to interact with the interface on a deeper level in this video and in other videos throughout the course. But yeah, you just drag them to wherever you need to do. This is a VST, for example. You could also drag the presets into the mixer, so on and so forth. Last useful thing about the browser is that you can access the history of your entire project by just going to this project tab and then going to history. And it's the same thing as going to like edit, undo by clicking Command+Z. And like, so I'll show you, for example, right? If I just start tweaking things, boom, I did that. Boom. And maybe like I'll go edit like a fader, right? If I wanted to undo like a bunch of undos in a row or a bunch of actions in a row, right? Like I could just come here and click that. Instead of like edit undo a bunch of times, you could just come in here and see your project history and see the changes. If you want to like go directly to an undo point instead of just like guessing with edit undo, that's something that's been really helpful for me as well in the browser. So with all that being said, let's move on to the next item. So now let's talk about the channel rack. Now the channel rack is where all of your playable instruments are going to be able to live and become a part of your track, right? In the browser, you can audition sounds and hear them, but that doesn't help you actually create the beat. You've got to drag a sound into the playlist or into the channel rack and then program it to be able to have it become what would eventually be a beat. Or you've got to open an instrument in the channel rack and then manipulate the MIDI in the piano roll to have that become something that would actually be in your final beat. So again, channel rack, the main thing you need to understand about it is that it's where your playable sounds are going to live. This is where you play the instruments that eventually become your entire track. So for example, the way you open up instruments is you right click and open track that is already in the channel rack. There will always be at least one thing open, which will be a sampler. So if you delete this sampler, for example, if we right click it and delete it, whoops, we can just edit, undo that, or we could have done that in the history section. If I delete that, it will just auto populate a new sampler. So there will always be at least one sampler. So what you do is you right click it and you go to insert and you'll see a bunch of instruments. If you have any downloaded, like for example, Repro is a third-party VST that I paid about $200 for a couple of years ago. But there's also a lot of stock FL Studio things as well, like FL Keys, Flex, Citrus, a lot of powerful VSTs. So like I can open up FL Keys, right? And now we can begin to make sound just through the instrument, right? And that's cool. And we can also come in here and start programming or writing melody, right? We wanted to make a really quick E minor chord. Boom. Where your playable instruments live, this is where you're going to be able to create melody. So even if I wanted to, let's say I wanted to use the channel rack and do a drum pattern as well, what we would do is go back to our demo packs, go to the 14 drum kit, and we would grab, say, a Spins 808, and we would right click that and we would say open a new channel in the channel rack. We open it in the channel rack. You could also say just drag it into the channel rack. That's also another thing that you could do. And I'll just edit, undo that. And so we could come in here and we have our 808 programmed. Right? In the channel rack, it's just an instrument that is in our library that we're auditioning. But once we drag it, or not in the channel rack, in the browser, it's just an instrument that's in our library, right? And we can audition it. But once we drag it into the channel rack, it becomes a channel that we can edit. Something to note is that anything that is opened in any audio file that is opened in your project automatically populates in the channel rack, right? So if you were going to drag like a melody loop into the playlist, it would automatically populate here. So if I went to, say, a perc loop, or we could even just go to a melody loop from this free multi-kit that I'm working on. And let's grab a melody loop, right? If we drag this into the playlist, it will automatically populate in our browser. We could delete that, right? And we could do it a different way. We could drag it instead into the playlist directly, and it will populate it, but in a much different way, right? It's not in the playlist anymore, and it populates it almost as a drum sample. So that happens instead. And if you play it on C, it would always just match that. If you play it on C5, it'll always just play the sample as is for however long. You have to get into trying to tempo match it, and that's one way that you can manipulate audio. It's not the most effective way, but I did just want to demonstrate that. So we'll just delete that. That's getting a little bit outside the realm of things that we need to cover, but I just wanted to show you basically how the channel rack functions and how it kind of interacts with the other aspects of the interface, like the playlist, like the browser and stuff like that. That being said, that does bring us to the next tool, which is the playlist. Now, the playlist is where you take what you're doing in the channel rack and your various channels and the various patterns that you create using the channel rack. You take those and you structure out a full track. It's where your patterns become a full track. It's where your entire beat is made, where your entire song is created. So this is the playlist right here. This is the entire playlist. This is the magic of the playlist right here. It is the most beautiful thing. It's where all the magic is going to happen. It's where a lot of the fun magic is going to happen. So in our channels, in our channel rack and in our piano roll, which we'll cover right after this section, we're making patterns, and we'll cover patterns more deeply in another lesson, but we're making patterns and we're using channels to create those patterns. But once we get into the playlist, we're making a track now. We're making a more finished, we're making a more composite piece. It's going from an 8-bar loop to a complete track. And that's kind of the main utility in the playlist. Again, there's a bunch of other wonky things you can get into. You can get into tracking and stuff like that. That's a little bit outside the intent of this course, but if we get there, we'll get there. But I just want to, again, show you the most useful things you'll get out of this. And the only thing you really need to understand about the playlist is it's where you structure your track. So you can always access your playlist by clicking this icon up here. It'll open it and it'll close it. Open, close. And it's the same thing for everything that you want to open, right? So some things we've covered so far, you can open and close your browser using this. So I'll keep the browser closed for right now. And like I said, you can open and close the playlist using this. You can open and close your piano roll using this. It'll open up whatever was the most recent piano roll you had open. So you could close that, and then again, it'll just open up your most recent piano roll. But if you wanted to change your piano roll, then you could go to your channel rack, and now you're opening this piano roll. So if you close that, it'll open your most recent piano roll, which is the 808. So that brings us to the next thing we want to talk about, which is the mixer. And essentially, this is just where your track is mixed. It interacts with the channel rack by allowing you to route tracks into the mixer so that you can level them further using the mix faders and then add various effects using these inserts. So you have your tracks, right? And then every track has a fader. And then every track also has inserts where you can add effects. It has 10 inserts. You can manipulate that further with a plugin called Patcher, but for now, let's just say it has 10 inserts. And this is where you add effects. You can add things like equalization. You can add things like delay. You can add things like reverb. This is where you're going to add the effects. This is where you're going to do the mixing. This is where you're going to add that sauce to your beat wherever is needed in order to make it sound like a more polished and refined finished product. A couple of important notes to make about this is that all of these inserts feed directly into the master insert. Now we can get into tweaking some of that and with the concept of signal flow, but again, that's getting ahead of ourselves. We'll cover that when we get into the module that covers mixing specifically. But just so you understand the basics of how the mixer works, all of these tracks have sound and all of that sound flows to the master. For the most part, you never really want to touch this fader. Again, we'll talk about that when we get to mixing, but you can always, tweak these. You're pretty much good to go with those. But if you can, try to avoid touching that, leave that there, and then kind of level everything against whatever that volume is set to. And then the other thing I want to cover with that is that there's a really cool console EQ within the mixer that you would really want to get good at using. And again, we'll cover that when we get to mixing, but it's a really cool part about the mixer that I think a lot of producers sleep on. All right, moving right along, we'll come right back to the piano roll. So we've covered this a little bit and we've already kind of done our example, but we'll do another example in a minute. This is where you write your melodies and where you program your drums. So we can, just so that I don't outright do the example right now, in your piano roll, this is where you can switch the various patterns that you're editing inside of the piano roll. It's basically another way to switch channels, but you're doing it from within the piano roll instead of the channel rack so that you don't have to keep opening the channel rack to do it. So I'll come into the FL keys, open up FL keys, and we'll just make a super basic arpeggiating pattern to write our melody for this little example. I literally just broke up the chord. The word arpeggio actually just means broken chord. And I don't like E minor, so I'm gonna put that there at C minor, C sharp minor, and I'm gonna duplicate that over using Command plus B so that it's a little bit longer. And I'm gonna come back into the playlist to check that out. Right, I need to drag out our pattern a little bit so that it's all the way for the 8 bars. And then I'll just double click that pattern in the playlist to come back in here, and I'll press 4 so that I can, the 4 key so that I can see my entire screen for the piano roll. And I like my melody, so now I'll just go to the 808, select that. And since luckily this is tuned to C already, we'll get into how you can tune your 808s later if it's not tuned to C, but luckily this 808 is tuned to C, and I just know that because I understand the 14 drum kit. A lot of producers will label it. All of mine are tuned to C except for like one, so I didn't label it. In V3, I will actually label it because I understand how helpful it is. But anyways, a lot of Spin's 808s are tuned automatically to C. Helpful note. And we'll just program a super basic 808 pattern. And there you go. That's how you use the piano roll. You use it to program drums. If you wanted to program, I think an important note to make about the piano roll is how to program a drum correctly. So we'll go back to our demo packs folder and we'll open up just like a clap, for example. A traditionally like good place to program your drum sounds would be on this 5C. I couldn't talk, for example. Like, I'm already getting excited. We're in the beat making and I'm getting hype. I get too excited when we get to beat making, bro. I'm telling you. Right, C5 is just the way you want to do that. And the way I duplicated that over, I know I moved pretty quickly. I just selected this entire section by switching from a pencil tool. You use the pencil tool to click in notes in your piano roll. You use P to switch to that, or you can click it up here. And then what I did is I switched to my selector tool by pressing E, or you could go here to click your selector tool. And I'll do something like that, and I'll just cut that out using Command plus X. And I did that by selecting everything using the selector tool. But what I did to duplicate this clap over instead of programming it on the 3 every single time is I came in here and I selected that first bar and I just used Command plus B again. Command plus B is a very useful shortcut. Wink, wink. Now I just duplicated it over enough times to fit the 8 bars. And there we go, clap pattern. And then if you want to deselect, when you're selecting from the top like that, just make sure to click somewhere at the top and it'll deselect it. And then again, you can just drag across to select things. You can move them up an octave with Shift plus up. You can move them, or not up an octave, but up a semitone or down a semitone. You can move them over based on your grid setting by using the right and left directional keys, and you can change your grid setting using this, and we'll get into that a little bit more when we talk about making melody and programming drums. But this is where you can edit your, grid settings so that you can get even more nuance with the way you program, right? So right now we're only able to program in these increments of 4, but if we wanted to change that, we could go in here and now we're able to program in these increments of like thirds and stuff like that. And it's just like really, the piano roll is one of the coolest parts about FL Studio specifically. Its entire step sequencing functionality is very, very powerful. I could keep talking about this piano roll forever, but I think as we move out throughout the course, we'll definitely, hit on a lot of the important things. I think I've covered just about everything you need to know. And anything else that you kind of see in here, we will 100% come back to. Like the brush tool will make its, reappearance, but you can use the B key to switch over to that if you want to use a shortcut. We'll talk about scale highlighters, which is in here as well. It's a very exciting aspect of FL Studio, honestly. It's where a lot of the fun happens. I said it's the playlist, but really it's the piano roll. It's everywhere, but the piano roll is another place where a lot of the fun happens. So the last thing I want to cover before we get into doing just one more example and then we'll get out of here is how to change your theme. So again, you just come to options and this time you go to theme settings. Again, you could have toggled there from the file exploration that we did earlier, but I just wanted to bring it back to show you exactly how this specific aspect of the interface works in general. But anyway, then they have all these really awesome presets. They used to have themes in the old FL Studio, got rid of them for a while. Then there was a way you could like hack your FL Studio to have themes. It's pretty wonky, effed up a lot of my projects, so I stopped doing it. But now they've reintroduced it in a more robust way for one, but it's also open source. So outside of these kind of stock themes that they have for you, which are pretty baller, I don't see myself ever changing from this purple one. Honestly, it's really cool. A lot of people seem to enjoy it as well. Even like Metro Boomin has it, so it's really really cool. For some reason, it's just like an inspirational template of good palette of color. I don't know why, but you can select a bunch of different ones. You can also make your own and then save the preset, and then you can share presets. People sell presets and stuff like that, and that's another way that you can customize your FL Studio as well. So yeah, it's really really cool. It's really, really cool. So let's get into practicing everything we've learned to make our first beats, and then we'll get out of here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come into the playlist and I'm going to mute these patterns by selecting this mute tool and then clicking on them. You can unmute it, mute it. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to come to pattern and I'm going to select, where is it? Oh, I'm crazy. It's the plus sign, right? So we're going to click the plus sign and we're going to add a new pattern, and we're not even going to name it. So we'll just click enter and it'll automatically call it pattern 2. And boom, and we'll stretch that out to 8 bars. And then a little wonky there, we'll select our cut tool. We could have dragged it, but I'll cut it just so it's precise, right? Because it's hanging over a little bit. And then again, I'll select the pencil tool and I will double click to delete that. And that's the way you can use the pencil tool in order to delete items that you don't want to use. And so I will click again to place this in the playlist. Anytime you click a pattern or a sample in the playlist, it saves that in the short-term memory of your like tool right here, right? So the next time you click, it'll duplicate the thing that you clicked. And this will happen in the piano roll as well. Whatever type of note, length of note, velocity of note, it'll keep duplicating that over until you click a new one, and then it'll store the new one in the memory. So for example, I've clicked this pattern. Now it'll start duplicating this pattern over. But I could click pattern 1 and it'll duplicate that pattern over, if that kind of makes sense. So now that we've got our pattern, we've got it selected, we'll open the channel rack and we'll open a new instrument. So this time I will insert Flex, which is a dope kind of synth instrument library that's stock to FL Studio, and they have a lot of free stuff. I want to use a bell sound. So I'm going to search all of the bells they have, and I think I have some favorites here, right? I really like the fluffy bell. And so the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to right click the fluffy bell and then go to piano roll, and I'm going to click in a melody. Now don't worry too much about what I'm doing. Feel free to follow along, because I think that will be 100% helpful. Hands-on experience is how you get good at anything. You get good at what you do. We'll cover how to do melodies. We'll cover how to program stuff. We'll cover the playlist again more extensively when we do things like drum programming and melody making. Don't overthink it. This is just a demonstration of all the interface tools we've learned so far. If it's overwhelming, it's supposed to be. It will get less overwhelming, I promise. Anyways, boom, come in here. Right, our grid option is horrendous. Let's change that. And what we'll do is we'll hit Shift plus D to snap it to that grid chop. And now we can make a melody. That's going crazy. Okay, so then we can just duplicate that over. Get rid of that. We'll do some velocity control here. some of these notes, and then we'll hit Option plus S to strum that, and then we'll, yeah, that's good. Cool. And then we'll just duplicate that over a few more times so that it fills out 8 bars. And that's our melody. We won't overthink it too much. Next, let's program. We did an 808 last time, so this time let's just program like a kick drum. I think that'll be pretty simple. Right, so then we can take this drum sample and we'll drag it into our channel rack. Boom. Important to note that I guess I didn't really cover. If you drag it onto something, it will change that sample, but you can undo that. So you want to kind of make sure you're like dragging it in that little in between, and it'll do a good job of showing you. I really like the interface of FL Studio. It's awesome. That's why it deserves its own entire lesson. So yeah, I'll just drag it under here like I did just to show you one more time. And then boom, we'll just come here. And where did I say to program drums traditionally? C5, yes. So you can always change it. There's no set rules, but traditionally, for one, the original sample, the quality of the original sample that you're hearing when you audition can always be captured by placing the note on C5. That's how you get that original quality. Now, if you start bringing it, let me increase the velocity so that it increases the volume of this. And let me turn off those loop points. Anytime you hear a drum repeating like that, it's the loop points. And I'll turn that up a little bit more. It's not really sounding loud. It could be louder, so I'm going to turn it up in the channel rack right here using the volume. Whoops, wrong instrument. Yeah, now that's loud. Now that's loud, right? But we can pitch that down, and you can hear it getting deeper, and I'm doing that with shift plus down. But we could also pitch it up right past that C5, and you can hear it getting higher, sounding more like a high-end artifact now. But if you want that just like traditional quality of your drum sample, C5 is where you're going to program it. So again, I'll just program a drum pattern. I think that's good. We'll duplicate that over, 3 times so we get the 8 bars. Boom, hit stop to reset the pattern. And I mean, why not? Let's just program the clap. Let's just program the clap. Right, and when you duplicate anything over like that using that duplication method in the piano roll, it's gonna do that thing where it like kind of like stutters over and starts playing the next section wherever you duplicated, and that's always an indication to me that I'm still in my pattern, and creating it in the channel rack and not in the playlist. So the way you can move over to the playlist is you can just click in here and it'll automatically bring you over to the playlist. But you can also toggle it by using the L key, and that's pretty cool as well. And I think I just realized my camera's probably covering a lot of stuff. That really, really sucks. Wow. I just realized that. Damn. Right. I made a note to change that, and now I'll have it be better for every lesson moving forward. If you have any questions related to that blender, please let me know. I will do a really good job in the comment section, especially of this video, of answering any questions that you could not have answered because I forgot to move my camera. Absolutely hilarious. I'm not going to lie to you. Hopefully I won't have to record the video over again, but if it gets too bad, I will. Please let me know down in the comment section below. So the way you toggle that is with the L key, or you can click here and it'll toggle it automatically. And then the last thing we're going to do is we're going to route our tracks into the mixer and level them a little with the faders. So there are a couple of different ways you can do this, probably more than even the ones that I know, but the 2 that I know is, first, you can change wherever an insert in the channel rack is routed by just clicking here, holding it, and then using your scroll wheel or, scrolling with your trackpad. So I'll just scroll up 1 increment to add that to track 1. And as you can see, it's changing inserts right here in the mix fader. Now, the other way you can do that is you can make sure your track is selected, right? It's important to make sure it's selected, and you can do that by clicking these various little things here and make sure it's lit up. And then what you do is you come to a track that is empty, or you can route multiple things to the same track if you want to. But if you want to route something to a fresh new track, you go to one that's empty, which is insert 2 in this example. And we'll press, you can do it using a shortcut, Command plus L, right? Or we can undo that and we can right click, we go to channel routing, and I believe, yes, we route select the channels to this track. I'm such a shortcut junkie. I hadn't done it. I had to really think about that. But yes, that's how you route that. Right, it's got all those effects we turned on earlier, but we didn't have anything playing. So what I'll do is I'll just turn off those inserts, which you can do by just toggling these on and off. If it's lit up, it's on. If it's not lit up, it's off. So another cool thing you can do in the channel rack is you can click shift to highlight multiple tracks, or to click individual tracks so that you can like route multiple or like manipulate them in various ways. Like if I wanted to move multiple tracks up or something like that, because you can use option plus up and down to move things in the channel rack and stuff like that. But I could select multiple of these by doing that. Or let's say these were apart from each other. I could select both of them by just holding, making sure shift is being held the entire time, and clicking both of them, making sure they're highlighted. And then what I'll do is I'll go to a new track because I want to route these, you know, sequentially, and I'll hold command plus shift plus L to route them sequentially, or I can undo that and I can come back here and I can go to channel routing and I can route selected channels starting from this track, which will do the same thing. And now we've got all our sound in the mixer where we can turn everything off and we can do a little bit of leveling. So let's see. I'll press enter to maximize the view of my mix fader. That's cool. That's cool. I like that. I want my clap to be pretty loud too, maybe a little quieter. Okay, cool. And then the melody. Cool. Maybe I want like a little bit of EQ, so I'll turn that back on. There's nothing happening with our EQ right now, but if I drag this like that, it'll EQ out some of those high-end frequencies. And all equalization means is that you're leveling by frequency. So I'm turning down the volume of some of the low-end frequencies in the melody so that it doesn't interfere with the kick or with the 808 if we had the 808 going. And boom, there's our first beat. So we covered a bunch of stuff, but to go over the TLDR here, we covered the interface, and the important things you need to understand about the interface are the very basic tools here. So the browser, the channel rack, the playlist, the mix fader, the mixer in general, and then the faders, which are in the mixer, which are just the volume knobs, and then the piano roll, right? So the browser is just where you can select files. The piano roll is where you write melodies, program drums. The mixer is where you mix. The playlist is where your track is arranged. And the channel rack is where your playable sounds live. We also went over how to customize your workspace. And then we made our first beat, which was pretty cool. So in the next lesson, we'll be setting up our first project. This was just like our first beat. In the next lesson, we're going to be going over actually setting up a project and then kind of how the workflow works for turning that into a full track, full beat, whatever you call it. If you have any questions, please comment them below. I will answer every single question because I want this course to be as valuable and as helpful as possible. I want it to be a blessing in your life. I'll see you in the next lesson. Thank you so much for watching. Peace.